Hey guys, National Chess Master Jonathan Hilton here. I am looking at the Chaturanga games between Levi Rosman, who is GothamChess, and Hikaru Nakamura. If you want to hear a full explanation of how to play, I've done that in other videos, but just for the basics, the king, knight, and rook move the same as in regular chess. Pawns move only one square on their first square, otherwise they move normally, and they only promote to this piece, which is the furs or the vizier or advisor. That piece moves only one square diagonally at a time. It's like a super short range bishop. And this piece here is the elephant. It jumps exactly 2 squares diagonally, so it can only go to a total of 8 squares on the board. So it's not a particularly strong piece, and it jumps, so it goes over other pieces, but it doesn't capture what's in between. All right, so with that, this looks like it's game 2 of our match between Levi Rosman and Hikaru. We see Hikaru opening with knight to f6. That had worked for him pretty well in a previous game, and I like that in this game he seems to have improved. He's not starting with one elephant to a6. He's just launching straight into this. Typically, though, Chaturanga is a game of pawns. It would probably be better to see this f pawn come up, try to play something that looks sort of like a Dutch. That is the way that Chaturanga is typically played, but Levy doesn't know this either, and is going with knight to f3, d6. I like this. Elephant to d3. Not a great move. White should get the pawn to d4 first before attempting to get the elephant up here. This elephant, it's really only attacking 2 squares, so this is not going to be too useful. Pawn to d5, Hikaru, that's a good move. He's nailing it with that. That is good. Pawn to h3, White's probably going to try to run the g-pawn down. It's not a bad move, but uh, the white pieces are probably not going to be too well coordinated in this game. We can see that already. e6, this looks good. This is clearing a path for the furs to come into the center. c3, not particularly bad, but if white wants to make this work, he's got to find like b3 followed by c4 as sort of the path forward to hopefully just get a knight in, try to really really get something going. Elephant to d6, not a huge fan of this, but it's not a terrible way to play. In most games, it's probably going to be better to stick the furs here, and that way you get a nice support to develop out the center pawn to e5. That'll clear the way for this elephant maybe to come to e6. The problem with putting the elephant here is that if white ever does manage to coordinate this push, then the elephant is just sort of sitting there. That being said, black has a good grip on the e4 square, so that's probably not going to happen. But it is going to be a little bit harder for black to try to support the e5 push. b3, all right, going for c4. White finds the right plan. Knight bd7, this looks good. Fursan to e2, that's fine. And then Fursan coming into e7, not bad. And then pawn to c4. Okay, and then we see c6 by black, and knight to c3. So if we just go back, this move pawn to c4, this is kind of one of those moments where you typically want to kind of look at the opening position and see whether there is a chance to weaken this c4 pawn by playing d takes c4. Because of the fact that this elephant is here on d3, it's not protecting the c4 pawn because the elephant only jumps. And this Fursan's blocked from coming to protect the pawn on c4, and the pawn is blocked from coming up to d3. So the first thing that comes to mind is taking, and then here and now we might actually see the elephant come out to a6. We just attack this pawn on c4. The pawn can't come up to c5 because that's guarded by the knight. So the question is, how is white going to defend this pawn? The move knight to a3 is possible, but it does look a little bit awkward. But I think maybe the right way to go for white would be to try to mix it up. Maybe throw in elephant to b5. Knights are a major piece in this game. Knights and rooks are the two strongest pieces, and the elephant is, worth about a pawn or less. So black's going to have to move this piece. If knight to b6, and we actually see this pawn coming up to c5 with good effect, because remember, the elephant can't take it, it can only go here. So that would be one way for white to get out of the fact that his pawn on c4 is a little bit weak. Knight to c5 is another kind of tempting possibility, but I think here bishop to a3, or elephant to a3 I should say, is going to attack this knight again. It can't go back to d7 because of the elephant, so okay, it would probably go out here, and then white will play d3 and so on and so forth. Actually, this knight looks like it gets trapped in the center of the board. So so looking at this after c4, I think Hikaru's instincts are right to play c6. It might be a little bit of a different story if the furs were on d6 rather than this elephant, so that there would be something stopping the c4, c5 push when the knight moves away to keep ganging up on this c4 pawn. But in this position, yeah, I think Hikaru is basically right to play pawn to c6. Knight to c3. Okay, you can kind of calculate again. Is there something going on here with d takes, b takes, bishop to a6? This looks a little bit better now because there's less of a possibility that a bishop to b5 is really that good a move. Of course, c takes, probably c takes here. And the black elephant on a6 is maybe not in that great of shape itself. So there's certainly some potential there. Also, bishop to a6, another move, attacking this and trying to force white to play here, and then just kind of allowing black to take back and hopefully get some good play along the c file. So there are some possibilities. a6 is not a bad move either. The idea is probably going to be to get in either an eventual b5 break or maybe just to gain a little bit of space. But a6 is not looking bad. Bishop to a3 or elephant to a3, that looks fine. White's trying to support this pawn coming up, and b6, I think wisely just trying to guard against that. Rook to c1. White's focused on trying to get this push in. And here we see Hikaru play pawn to b5, really just trying to spice this game up. Looking at it, trying to think, okay, what would I do if I had this position? I do like the idea of trying to play against the c4 pawn, something like takes, maybe trying to fix it. And then, I think this pawn maybe long term is going to be a weakness. But it doesn't look like any kind of big advantage for black there. And I think pawn to b5 in a way is a logical follow-up. And here we see knight to d4, and Hikaru actually ends up making kind of the awkward move, knight to b8. So yeah, so it looks to me maybe b5 is not maybe b5 is not the right approach. In addition to knight to d4, there's also a potentially strong way to go with c takes. And then after a takes, remember, elephants are not really worth that much. And even though this elephant's hanging, I think the right thing to do now is just to hang another elephant. But it's attacking this very important knight on d7. White, Black pretty much has to take this elephant sacrifice. I think you have to take it because if you move your own knight away, then this elephant now can come into c5. And now the elephant is threatening the furs. The furs is a stronger piece because it can move to half the squares on the board, whereas the elephant can only move to 8. And so it looks like white's going to get some pretty juicy play here after black tries to save the furs. Now either knight to e5 or knight to d4, both of those look pretty good. And white is going to put some pressure on c6, and black's king is a little bit open, so kind of looks like black's in some trouble there. But if you play c takes, and after knight takes b5, knight to c7 check is threatened. Remember, the elephant can't take, it can only jump, so knight to c7 is a really big problem. And white has gotten 2 pawns, connected pass pawns on the queen side as well, or as we say in Chaturanga, the Farzan side. And that's just in exchange for an elephant. 2 pawns definitely better than an elephant, and knight to c7 is a big threat. So I tend to think white is doing very, very well there. And then knight to d4, forcing knight to b8, this also looks good. So I think b5 is a little bit too ambitious. What's the right approach for black? It's possible, probably just d takes, and then maybe here to try to fix this pawn. Black has pretty good play here. He's going to end up probably sinking this elephant into this square, which is a pretty good outpost. And then eventually he's probably going to play a5 and try to get his own bishop or elephant out to a6. And he's just going to try to grind on this pawn. So that looks like some structural advantage for black. I'd be happy to play that position as black. But I think b5 is a little too ambitious. So now knight d4, attacking the c6 point. Let me see, knight to b8. Was it possible to play pawn to c5? Probably not. White would just play elephant takes. And then after taking this way, white can just continue to eat pawns with c takes b5. And that elephants are not really a big deal, and white is going to have really great play here on that Farzan side. So knight to b8, looking pretty awkward. And then we see pawn to c5 by white. This strikes me as probably a bit of a mistake because after elephant to b4, just kind of stepping out of the way, this piece is going to be really hard to dislodge. We're probably going to see the pawn come up to a5 by black. So that kind of manages to gum up the works. I have to think that something along the lines of maybe taking c takes and then maybe if e takes, because black wants to try to keep everything nice and defended. And there's probably a chance now to just jump this elephant into c5. It's threatening the furs, which is the stronger piece in the elephant, so it's going to end up moving away. And then at this point, exactly what the follow-up is isn't clear. Knight to f5 with some kind of a weird fork. This may just win material. That looks pretty good to me. Is it possible maybe the first has to come here to defend the g7 point? But that's entirely valid. Among other things, white can just play a3 and b4 to really just kind of cement in this elephant on the good square. Knight to f5, putting more pressure on this elephant also looks like a pretty good attacking possibility. It kind of forces black's king to stay in the center. Sort of like, how else will we defend the elephant? It could go into b4, but now it could just be kicked around with pawn to a3. And if black plays king to d7, this king's going to end up being stuck in the center for a pretty long time to come. And there will be ways for white to try to get at it with the elephant coming in, maybe, or maybe some elephant sack on this square. And again, not the end of the world for black by any means, but I should think that white after elephant to c5 certainly has pretty good attacking chances. So I think that's probably right. And then if e takes instead, I think we probably still see elephant to c5. We may just see takes, and then after takes, maybe taking this way with a threat of rook takes c8, and the knight just nicely defends this elephant on a3. So that looks like black could end up being in some pretty serious trouble. If the elephant moves, elephant comes into c5, it's going to kick this furs away. But the problem is if the furs gets kicked, then the elephant dies. So that's going to be trouble if king to d7. Note that the elephant does not defend this square, so that gives the attacker some good opportunities. Rook to c7 looks like a pretty good move there. King to d8. Elephant comes in. If this piece gets driven away, then f7 falls, something like knight to a6 maybe. But here I think we're running into some pretty serious problems, like knight check, king over. Now we just, oops, not that, but just grab this here, king to f8, knight takes, and we're actually working on a mate. So for instance, if knight takes here, then we have takes, king over, and then knight to e7 is mate. So who says ancient chess doesn't have good tactics? This is basically a kind of the equivalent of a windmill attack in these ancient games. So this looks like a pretty overpowering position. I would expect white to win there. So Hikaru's plan of getting in pawn to b5 a little bit too ambitious for this game. And then after knight to b8, I think pawn to c5 though really throws away most of the advantage. I think white has to play actively, something like c takes here and takes, or maybe playing e takes and then trying to get some activity this way as white. But after pawn to c5, all right, elephant comes into b4, knight to c2, pawn to a5. Okay, elephant takes b5. Great active move. I love this for white because the elephant, if white doesn't play this, then he's probably never going to get anywhere on this side of the board. And elephants are battering rams. They are used sacrificially, so this is a really good find. And then kind of an interesting decision by Hikaru, and one, this is probably wise, just taking the center instead of being grubby and trying to take this elephant. Although I'm not convinced that black can't take the elephant. I think if we take the elephant, then after knight takes, threatening the knight coming in, probably here we see knight to a6. And it's a little bit hard to actually find a continuation for white to really move the attack forward. Maybe bringing the knight in here would be the right play. This maybe gets a little bit dicey. But there would be some ideas for white. So for instance, e5, maybe the knight comes into c6, tickling this e5 pawn. Then knights, when they get this far advanced, there's some thought that they might get trapped, but this knight seems pretty active. It's threatening to take this pawn on a5. So maybe that's the way forward. Maybe takes. So takes, knight a6, and then maybe this is the right plan. But that's not to say that black couldn't find counterplay of his own. In this position, he's got to do something with this king though first, so he's probably going to end up playing king f8, g6, and just trying to castle by hand. And in the meantime, maybe white makes some progress. But discretion is a better part of valor here, and I think not taking there's certainly a lot to be said for that. Black is just down a b pawn. It's not fatal or anything, just to be down a pawn, and black is going to instead take the center. So I like that approach really well, and I think Hikaru is making a great decision there. King to f1 makes sense. White has to do something to castle, although probably a better strategy would be f3 and king to f2. The bomb cloud setup is typically the right setup in Chaturanga. Guards e4, which is very good, and gets the king onto the second rank pretty easily, so these rooks are connected. King to f1, king to f8. Black does not have the option of going with a bomb cloud here, so king to f8 looks right. Elephant jumps back, which is fine, although after e4, it's a little bit hard to say where this elephant's going to go. I think Levy gets on the wrong track, though, because he actually tries to save the elephant. Ultimately, this is just not going to work because in the long term, the elephant's just going to get eaten that way. Better to just leave the elephant there, play pawn to f3. Because if you encourage white to take, or black to take, then white just takes back. And now white is going to have all of the center pawns, and suddenly white is the one with control of the center. And believe it or not, white's actually up material here because he won a pawn earlier. He won the b pawn. So if he just gives up his elephant for one additional pawn, particularly it being a center pawn, which is really, really good, that's a great pawn to have. This to me means white's going to be sitting on a pretty comfortable advantage. 2 pawns for an elephant is a good deal almost any time. So yeah, so pawn to f3 would have been the way to go, but bringing the elephant in, the elephant's not going to do anything. Okay, this elephant came out to a6. No problems really with that move. h4, so setting up this really kind of terrible way to retreat the elephant into passivity, and then just knight bd7. So black has really good compensation for the pawn here. Yeah, the only way that white's going to end up coming out ahead on this is maybe if he gets some play on the c6 point. So okay, that's what he tries to do. Knight to d4, knight to e5. King g1, this all looks pretty slow because after king to g7, black's now fully developed. I feel like if we want to play anything good for white here, we've got to go ahead and play f3. The threat is to bring the pawn to f4, kick the knight out, and then eat the pawn on c6. E takes f3 is probably not good. That would allow white to kind of take control of the center and play, you know, f4, d3, maybe king f2 to shore up the e3 pawn. So that doesn't look like the right approach. Maybe black will just defend this pawn, maybe plays rook to c8 or something. The idea being, okay, f4, just jump the knight in here. It's a good outpost, and white has not really succeeded in attacking this just yet. But, you know, at the very least, maybe here now white goes knight a4, knight to b6. One quick point, though, in all this, just something I guess the players, and just including myself, just until recently, I have been overlooking. Actually, there's a little bit of a blunder here. King to f1, actually the d pawn hangs. I didn't see that. It's just this is so unusual, but yeah, actually here, black can just win the d pawn, and there's no compensation for this because the open d file doesn't get anything for white. I mean, I guess white can push this, but then black would just push back. So okay, I think everybody's been missing that, myself included. So king to f1. I guess it had to be prefaced with something like pawn to d3 first and just leave the elephant out here in the cold to die. So yeah, very, very interesting. But, you know, for instance, certainly at this moment, there's no reason that black shouldn't just grab the pawn on d2. But I don't think anybody sees this. King to g7. Okay, h5, this is self-destruct mode. There's not going to be anything there for white. White's plan really needs to be just like king h2, pawn to f3, try to crack open the center somehow, maybe swing this rook over and try to get the pawn break on d3 in as well. Maybe if white can force open the center and get some trades or something, maybe he'll eventually make some use of his extra pawn. But yeah, pawn to h5 is self-destruct mode. Knight takes, elephant here. Yeah, knight just went back to f6, no big deal. Oh, and then finally, yep, Hikaru sees it, taking the pawn on d2. He sees it, he goes for it, and yeah, there's just nothing stopping that. Rook to d1, elephant back. Elephant back, all right, trying for a3, but this is pretty close to lost now for white, or maybe it's just totally lost. Rook over, pawn to a3. Yeah, pawn to a4. Kind of, yeah, it's interesting just cracking this open. Although, I think knight takes a4. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that white's going to technically get enough, or black's going to technically get enough for the pawn. There's no reason after a3 not just to run the elephant back, because c takes and then takes here. This is plenty of material for that elephant, and black is threatening to play c5 and rook takes b3. Well, that does maybe weaken the d5 pawn a little. The other thing too, black can just leave the elephant here because a takes. Could be met by rook takes, just putting good pressure on b3. Elephant to c4 comes to mind as a way to just try to open the game up. If takes and just knight takes, this is just a very powerful knight. And then, you know, white has to defend the first, so he'll drop it back, probably, so, you know, and then here, you know, black can continue any number of ways, but attacking the c5 pawn looks like a good idea. Maybe just knight back, followed by knight takes c5. So that ought to be a pretty straightforward win for black. A3, A4, this kind of mixes it up a little. Okay, B takes, that's just going to drop the knight. So now that's completely lost. Knight is a major piece. Can't drop the knight. So after bishop to c4, I think the right approach is just, you know, save the furs, and make black prove his compensation. And black certainly has compensation, but you know, if black doesn't find a good continuation forward, then white is just going to sink this knight probably into b6. And maybe then at the right moment, once this is all cleared out, it just play takes and takes. And if black's attack peters out, you know, white is going to have maybe a little bit extra material, or in any case, he'll have enough material to make a draw. That would be the hope. But instead we see b takes c4. Now after rook takes a4, there's not much left. I think that's all she wrote. Takes. Yeah, black is going to double along the second rank. There's not really much we can do there. Knight c3, rook e1. Rook to b1, yeah, fine, that's winning. I guess another point though, knight to d3 actually traps this rook. Can't move to any of these squares because of the knight. And remember, this furs, it's a short range piece. It can't come up and take this knight in any way. So, but rook to b1 also just completely winning. F3, okay, knight d3, all right, Naka finds it now. Takes, okay, all right. Yup. And there we go. We are just marching on. Kind of a cute idea to generate a little bit of counterplay, but probably just, yeah, I'm not. Oh well, okay. this is cute in that after check, takes it. Ooh, not sure that that was necessary. I was gonna say just grab this rook. I'm not sure what's wrong with grabbing the rook. Let's see what Naka finds. He finds takes. Oh, he's gonna come back knight g3 and knight takes. Okay, that's even better. That's even better. So takes here. Yeah. All right. There we go. Yup. Yep. So nicely done by Naka. He found some really great tactics at the end. And then just in terms of the opening, I mean, the knight coming out to f6, it's usually just going to be better for black to have the opportunity to put his king on f7. So, and you see that come into play a little bit in this game where Naka has to kind of do this kind of very slow castling by hand rather than just being able to play f6, king f7. This setup with bishop d3, not particularly good. I think around here, probably taking to just kind of put pressure on this pawn or something. Maybe omit the move a6. You know, it seemed like black had some chances, but here I think white throws away a really big chance to get an edge by just playing actively moves like bishop c5, c takes, and then trying to sacrifice this elephant over here. I think there were some really good chances, but c5 kind of blows it, and then I really like this move e5, just ignoring the elephant sack. That was a really great decision. The pawn on d2 was hanging for a while, and I think that ended up getting ignored. And white really did not manage to find a way to coordinate his pieces and kind of come back into the game. But very good game by Hikaru. Big improvement too, even over the first game he played. So we're definitely seeing him improve as these games go on. Thank you guys.